The desert wind carried dust and danger as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos positioned herself on the rocky outcrop, known locally as Hidden Woman Ridge. Her sniper rifle gleamed dully in the pre-dawn light. Its scope trained on the valley below where intelligence suggested enemy forces had established a stronghold. Maria had been deployed to this remote location in Afghanistan for 3 days, living off rations and rainwater, waiting for the perfect moment to provide overwatch for the incoming Navy SEAL team. The radio crackled softly in her ear as Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison's voice came through the static. His team, call sign Trident 6, was moving into position for what military planners called a high-value target extraction. The mission was simple on paper but deadly in execution. They needed to infiltrate a compound, retrieve vital intelligence, and extract a captured CIA operative before enemy reinforcements arrived. Maria adjusted her position slightly, feeling the familiar weight of her M24 sniper weapon system. She had earned her reputation as one of the most accurate shooters in the Army, with confirmed kills at distances that seemed impossible to most soldiers. But this mission felt different. The intelligence was sketchy, the terrain was unfavorable, and something in the air suggested trouble was coming. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team begin their approach. 6 figures moved like shadows through the rocky terrain, their movements coordinated and precise. Morrison led from the front, his experience evident in every calculated step. Behind him, Petty Officer Rodriguez carried the team's communications equipment, while Petty Officer Chen had the medical supplies that might mean the difference between life and death if things went wrong. The compound sat in a natural depression, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Maria counted at least 12 visible enemy combatants, but her training told her there were likely twice that number hidden from view. The SEALs would be walking into a potential death trap, and she was their only lifeline from above. As the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the valley, Maria noticed movement on the far ridgeline. Through her scope, she could see additional enemy forces taking positions. They were setting up what looked like a classic ambush, waiting for the SEALs to commit to their assault before revealing themselves. The intelligence had been compromised, and Trident 6 was walking into a carefully planned trap. Maria keyed her radio, speaking in the calm, measured tones that had earned her the trust of countless ground units. She reported the enemy positions, giving precise coordinates and estimated numbers. Morrison acknowledged her transmission, but the mission parameters were clear. The CIA operative had been missing for 72 hours, and every moment of delay increased the chances that valuable intelligence would be extracted through torture or that their asset would be executed. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and gunpowder. Maria had learned to read these signs during her multiple deployments. Combat was coming, and it would be fierce. She checked her ammunition count, verified her range cards, and settled into the shooting position that had become as natural to her as breathing. From her elevated position on Hidden Woman Ridge, she could see the entire battlefield spread out below like a deadly chess game. The SEALs reached their final approach position, taking cover behind a cluster of boulders approximately 400 meters from the compound walls. Maria could see Morrison studying the target through his own optics, making final adjustments to their assault plan based on her intelligence updates. The other team members prepared their equipment, checking weapons and explosives one last time. Through her scope, Maria noticed a young enemy fighter moving into position on the compound's eastern wall. He carried what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, a weapon that could devastate the SEAL team if they were caught in the open. She calculated the range, adjusted for wind and elevation, and placed her crosshairs on the target. But she held her fire, waiting for Morrison's signal to begin the coordinated assault. The radio fell silent as both teams made their final preparations. Maria felt the familiar calm that came before action, her breathing slow and steady, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. She had trained for moments like this, but no amount of preparation could fully capture the weight of responsibility she felt. 6 American lives depended on her accuracy and judgment in the next few minutes. The compound showed signs of increased activity as guards changed positions and additional fighters emerged from hidden bunkers. Maria updated her target priorities, identifying the most dangerous threats to the SEAL team's mission. The enemy had chosen their position well, with multiple overlapping fields of fire and excellent defensive positions. But they had not accounted for a single sniper on the overlooking ridge, a mistake that would prove costly. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the valley floor, Maria Santos prepared to demonstrate why she had earned her reputation as one of the deadliest snipers in the United States military. The battle for the compound was about to begin, and her rifle would speak first. The crack of Maria's rifle echoed across the valley like thunder, and the enemy fighter with the RPG launcher crumpled to the ground before he could take aim. The shot traveled over 600 meters, threading through a gap in the compound's defensive wall that measured less than 18 inches. It was the kind of shot that other snipers would discuss in hushed tones for years to come, but Maria was already acquiring her next target. Chaos erupted below as the SEAL team launched their assault. Morrison and his men moved with practiced precision, using the confusion created by Maria's shot to close the distance to the compound walls. Explosions bloomed as breaching charges cleared obstacles, and the distinctive rattle of automatic weapons fire filled the air. The carefully planned mission had become a running gunfight in seconds. Through her scope, Maria watched enemy fighters pour from hidden positions like disturbed ants. Her intelligence estimate had been conservative. There were at least 25 combatants in the compound, far more than the SEALs had expected. She began engaging targets with methodical precision, each shot calculated to provide maximum support for the team below. Her rifle spoke again and again, each bullet finding its mark with deadly accuracy. Rodriguez, the team's communications specialist, had taken cover behind a low wall and was coordinating with higher headquarters for immediate air support. But the nearest attack aircraft were 30 minutes away, and the SEALs needed help now. Maria could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as enemy fighters tried to establish overlapping fields of fire that would pin down the assault team. A new threat emerged from the compound's main building. 3 fighters carried what appeared to be a heavy machine gun, the kind of weapon that could cut through the SEALs' body armor like paper. They were moving toward a position that would give them a clear field of fire on Morrison's team. Maria tracked their movement, leading her target as they ran across open ground. Her shot took the gunner in the center of his chest, sending him tumbling backward and causing his teammates to abandon their weapon. The battle intensified as more enemy reinforcements arrived from the surrounding hills. Maria had been right about the ambush. Hidden fighters were now revealing themselves, taking positions on the high ground that surrounded the compound. The SEALs were caught in a deadly crossfire, their extraction route potentially cut off by superior numbers and advantageous terrain. Chen, the team medic, was treating a wounded SEAL behind inadequate cover when Maria spotted a sniper, taking aim at his position from a distant rooftop. The enemy marksman had excellent concealment and a clear shot at the exposed medics. Maria adjusted her scope for the extreme range, nearly 800 meters across broken terrain. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as she entered the zone that all great snipers knew. The shot broke cleanly, and the enemy sniper pitched forward, his rifle clattering to the ground. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, tense but controlled. They had located the captured CIA operative in the compound's basement, but he was in critical condition and would require immediate medical evacuation. The original extraction plan was no longer viable due to the increased enemy presence. They needed to hold their position until helicopter support could arrive, a prospect that seemed increasingly unlikely given the intensity of enemy fire. Maria began engaging targets with increased urgency, knowing that every enemy fighter she eliminated improved the SEALs' chances of survival. Her ammunition was running low, each shot now precious. She had started the mission with 20 rounds of match-grade ammunition, and more than half were already expended. There would be no resupply from her isolated position on Hidden Woman Ridge. The compound's remaining defenders were adapting to her presence, using smoke grenades and coordinated movement to limit her effectiveness. They had identified her general position and were beginning to direct fire toward the ridge. Bullets whined off the rocks around her position as enemy fighters with automatic weapons attempted to suppress her long-range fire. Maria adjusted her position slightly, using the natural terrain to maintain concealment while keeping visual contact with the battle. Below, a particularly bold group of enemy fighters attempted to flank the SEALs by using a drainage ditch that ran along the compound's northern wall. They moved in short rushes, trying to use available cover to avoid Maria's scope. But she had studied the terrain for 3 days, memorizing every rock and shadow. She engaged the lead fighter as he emerged from cover, then quickly shifted to target the second man in line. The flanking attempt collapsed as the remaining fighters sought better cover. The radio brought disturbing news. Intelligence sources reported that a significant enemy force was moving toward their position, potentially doubling the number of fighters already engaged. The SEALs were running out of ammunition, and their wounded teammate needed immediate medical attention that Chen couldn't provide in the field. The situation was rapidly becoming untenable. Morrison made the decision that defined great military leaders. Rather than attempt a dangerous withdrawal under fire, he ordered his team to consolidate their position and prepare for a prolonged engagement. They would hold the compound until air support arrived, protecting their wounded teammate and the rescued CIA operative regardless of the cost. It was a decision that placed enormous pressure on Maria to continue providing accurate fire support from her distant perch. As the second hour of combat began, Maria Santos realized that her single rifle might be all that stood between 6 Navy SEALs and complete disaster. The enemy was closing in from multiple directions, and her teammates below were running dangerously low on ammunition. Every shot would have to count, and failure was not an option. The sun climbed higher, turning Hidden Woman Ridge into a furnace as Maria maintained her deadly vigil. Sweat stung her eyes, but she dared not break her shooting position to wipe it away. Below, the SEALs had transformed the compound's courtyard into a fortress, using overturned vehicles and scattered equipment to create defensive positions. But their perimeter was shrinking as enemy forces pressed closer from all sides. A new wave of attackers emerged from the eastern hills, at least 15 fighters moving in coordinated bounds toward the compound. Maria counted her remaining ammunition, 7 rounds. Each bullet would need to achieve maximum effect, either eliminating key threats or disrupting enemy attacks at crucial moments. She selected her first target, a fighter carrying what appeared to be improvised explosive devices, potentially suicide bombs that could devastate the SEAL position. Her shot echoed across the valley, and the bomber collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris. The explosion of his own devices scattered the advancing fighters, buying precious time for Morrison's team to adjust their defensive positions. 6 rounds remaining, and the enemy showed no signs of retreating. If anything, their attacks were becoming more determined as word spread of the trapped Americans. Rodriguez had managed to establish communication with an AC-130 gunship that was still 20 minutes out from their position. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours given the intensity of the assault. Enemy mortars had begun falling around the compound, crude but effective weapons that sent deadly shrapnel bouncing off the walls. One near miss had already wounded another SEAL, leaving Chen with 2 critical patients and dwindling medical supplies. Through her scope, Maria noticed enemy fighters attempting to position mortars on the reverse slope of a nearby hill, a location that would give them perfect indirect fire capability against the pinned SEALs. The range was extreme, nearly 1,000 meters, but she had no choice but to attempt the shot. She calculated windage and elevation, accounting for the increased bullet drop over such distance. Her shot struck the mortar tube itself, sending it tumbling down the hillside and forcing the crew to abandon their position. 5 rounds left, and the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. Maria could see Morrison moving between defensive positions, encouraging his men and redistributing ammunition. His calm leadership was all that stood between his team and panic. But even the best leadership couldn't create bullets from thin air. The SEALs were reduced to single shots, making every round count as enemy fighters pressed closer to their perimeter. A group of enemy combatants had occupied a building that overlooked the compound, giving them an elevated position from which to direct devastating fire on the SEAL positions below. Maria could see muzzle flashes from multiple windows as automatic weapons raked the courtyard. She identified the most dangerous position, a window where a heavy machine gun had been set up with a clear field of fire. Her bullet shattered the window and silenced the weapon, but she knew it was a temporary reprieve. The battle had been raging for nearly 3 hours when Maria noticed movement that made her blood run cold. A technical vehicle, a pickup truck mounted with a heavy machine gun, was approaching from the south. The weapon could penetrate the SEALs' improvised cover and had enough ammunition to sustain continuous fire. If it reached an effective firing position, the mission would be over in minutes. Maria shifted her position slightly, finding a shooting lane that would allow her to engage the vehicle. The range was moderate, about 400 meters, but the target was moving and partially concealed by terrain features. She led the vehicle, aiming for the gunner rather than trying to disable the mechanical components. Her shot found its mark, sending the gunner tumbling from the truck bed. The vehicle swerved wildly as the driver lost control, eventually crashing into a boulder field. 3 rounds remained as the enemy launched what appeared to be their final coordinated assault. Fighters moved from multiple directions simultaneously, trying to overwhelm the SEAL defenses through sheer numbers. Maria had to make impossible choices about which targets to engage. She selected a fighter who was preparing to throw a grenade into the SEAL position, then quickly shifted to engage a sniper who had Morrison in his crosshairs. The radio crackled with the most welcome sound Maria had heard all day, the distinctive roar of aircraft engines. The AC-130 gunship had arrived, its crew already identifying targets through their sophisticated sensors. But the aircraft needed time to establish its firing pattern and coordinate with ground forces to avoid hitting friendly positions. Maria had to keep the enemy suppressed for just a few more minutes. Her penultimate shot eliminated a squad leader who was organizing a final rush on the compound. The enemy fighters scattered as their coordination broke down, giving the SEALs precious moments to reorganize their defense. Morrison's voice came over the radio, thanking her for the support and requesting she conserve her final round. For the most critical threat, that threat revealed itself moments later as an enemy fighter emerged from concealment with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher aimed directly at the building where the wounded SEALs and CIA operative were sheltering. The range was moderate, but the target was partially concealed and moving erratically. It was exactly the kind of shot that separated competent snipers from legendary ones. Maria steadied her rifle, controlling her breathing despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She had 1 bullet left and 6 American lives hung in the balance. The crosshairs settled on her target as the enemy fighter raised the RPG launcher to his shoulder. Everything else faded away. The heat, the exhaustion, the sound of distant gunfire. There was only the target, the rifle and the shot that would define her military career. The AC-130's guns began their deadly song as Maria's finger tightened on the trigger. The final round in her rifle would determine whether her lonely vigil on Hidden Woman Ridge had been enough to save the men fighting for their lives in the valley below. The battle's outcome hung on a single bullet and the woman who had spent 3 days waiting to fire it. Time seemed to slow as Maria's final bullet left the barrel of her rifle. The projectile traced a perfect arc through the desert air, covering the 450 meters to its target in less than a second. The enemy fighter with the RPG launcher was already pulling the trigger when Maria's bullet struck him center mass, sending him sprawling backward. The rocket-propelled grenade fired wildly into the air, exploding harmlessly against a distant hillside. Instead of destroying the building where wounded Americans lay helpless, the AC-130 gunship's devastating firepower immediately changed the dynamics of the battle. The aircraft's sensors had cataloged every enemy position, and its crew began methodically eliminating threats with precision that only came from advanced technology and extensive training. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield as the gunship's cannons found their targets, forcing enemy fighters to abandon their positions or be destroyed where they stood. Maria set down her now empty rifle and reached for her radio. Her ammunition was exhausted, but her mission was far from over. She began directing the AC-130's fire onto targets that posed the greatest threat to the SEAL team below. Her elevated position and 3 days of battlefield observation made her invaluable as a forward observer, guiding the aircraft's devastating weapons with deadly precision. Morrison's voice came over the radio, filled with relief and gratitude. The immediate threat had been neutralized, and medical evacuation helicopters were already inbound to extract the wounded. The CIA operative they had rescued was conscious and providing valuable intelligence about enemy operations in the region. What had begun as a potential disaster was transforming into a successful mission, thanks largely to Maria's intervention from Hidden Woman Ridge. The enemy forces that remained were retreating in disorder, their coordinated assault broken by the unexpected arrival of air support and the devastating accuracy of sniper fire that had eliminated their key leaders and weapon systems. Some fighters attempted to continue the engagement from long range, but the AC-130's advanced sensors could detect their muzzle flashes and return overwhelming firepower within seconds. As the sound of approaching helicopters grew louder, Maria began preparing for her own extraction. She had been in position for nearly 4 days, surviving on minimal rations and water while maintaining constant vigilance over the valley below. The physical and mental strain of the mission was finally catching up with her, but professional pride kept her focused on completing every aspect of her duties. The first helicopter to arrive was a medical evacuation aircraft, its crew immediately moving to stabilize and transport the wounded SEALs and the rescued CIA operative. Maria watched through her rifle scope, now serving as a simple observation tool, as medics worked with practiced efficiency to prepare their patients for transport. Chen, despite his own minor wounds, continued to assist with medical care until the last moment. Morrison and his remaining team members established a security perimeter around the landing zone, their weapons trained on likely enemy approaches even though organized resistance had largely collapsed. The SEAL leader took a moment to look up toward Hidden Woman Ridge, raising his hand in acknowledgement of the sniper who had made their survival possible. The gesture was simple but carried enormous meaning for both warriors. A second helicopter approached Maria's position on the ridge, its crew already briefed on her location and the critical role she had played in the mission's success. The aircraft had to navigate carefully between rocky outcroppings to reach a suitable landing zone, a testament to the isolation that had made her position so effective for long-range observation and fire support. As the helicopter settled onto the narrow landing zone, Maria quickly gathered her equipment. Her rifle would require detailed maintenance after the extended engagement, and her gear needed careful accounting to ensure nothing sensitive was left behind. The ridge had been her home for 4 days, but she was eager to return to base in the company of fellow soldiers who would understand what she had accomplished. The flight back to base gave Maria her first opportunity to see the complete battlefield from a different perspective. The compound below showed the scars of intense combat, with destroyed vehicles and damaged buildings marking the locations where the fiercest fighting had occurred. Smoke still rose from several locations where the AC-130's fire had found its targets, creating a stark landscape that told the story of the morning's violence, intelligence. Analysts would later determine that Maria's intervention had prevented what could have been one of the deadliest ambushes in recent military history. The enemy had planned their attack carefully, positioning superior numbers and heavy weapons to ensure the destruction of any American force that attempted to assault the compound. They had not accounted for a single sniper with the skill and determination to engage targets at extreme range while under intense pressure. The mission's success rippled through military circles, generating detailed after-action reports and tactical studies that would influence future operations. Maria's shooting had been recorded by various sensors and observation platforms, providing concrete evidence of marksmanship that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Her longest confirmed kill during the engagement exceeded 800 meters, achieved under combat conditions that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. Back at base, Maria submitted her equipment for maintenance and began the process of debriefing with intelligence officers who wanted to capture every detail of her observations. The information she had gathered during her 4-day vigil would prove invaluable for future operations in the region, providing insights into enemy tactics and capabilities that could only come from prolonged observation under combat conditions. The rescued CIA operative recovered from his injuries and provided intelligence that led to the disruption of several enemy networks throughout the region. The SEALs all returned to duty after medical treatment, their wounds serving as reminders of how close they had come to disaster. The mission had succeeded, but everyone involved understood that success had balanced on the edge of a knife, with a single rifle from Hidden Woman Ridge, providing the margin that made the difference between victory and catastrophe. 3 weeks after the battle at Hidden Woman Ridge, Maria Santos found herself standing at attention in a ceremony room filled with senior military officers and government officials. The Bronze Star Medal with Valor device felt surprisingly heavy in the commanding general's hands as he prepared to pin it to her uniform. The citation would become part of military history, documenting how a single soldier's exceptional marksmanship had saved the lives of 6 Navy SEALs and a captured intelligence operative. The ceremony was attended by Morrison and his surviving team members, all of whom had insisted on being present to witness Maria's recognition. Their faces showed the respect that only came from shared combat experience, understanding better than anyone else in the room what her actions had meant during those desperate hours in the Afghan mountains. Rodriguez, still recovering from shrapnel wounds, had traveled from a military hospital to attend the ceremony. During her brief acceptance speech, Maria spoke about the teamwork that had made the mission successful, deflecting personal credit toward the SEALs who had fought the ground battle and the aircrew who had provided the decisive firepower. But everyone in the room understood that her modesty couldn't diminish the extraordinary nature of her achievement. Military snipers from around the world would study her engagement for years to come, analyzing the techniques and decision-making that had enabled such remarkable results. The intelligence gathered during the mission had already yielded significant results across the region. The CIA operatives' information had led to the capture of several high-value targets and the disruption of weapons smuggling networks that had been operating for years. Military planners credited the mission's success with preventing multiple terrorist attacks against coalition forces and civilian targets throughout Afghanistan and neighboring countries. Behind the public recognition, Maria struggled with the psychological aftermath of the intense combat engagement. She had eliminated more than a dozen enemy fighters during the 4-hour battle, each shot carefully calculated and deliberately executed, while she felt no regret about actions taken to save American lives. The weight of taking human life in combat was something that required ongoing processing and support from military counselors and fellow veterans. The technical aspects of her shooting performance had impressed even the most experienced snipers in the military community. Her longest confirmed kill at 830 meters had been achieved with a rifle and ammunition system that was considered effective to only 600 meters under ideal conditions. The shot had required precise calculations for bullet drop, wind deflection, and target movement, all performed under the stress of knowing that failure meant the death of fellow soldiers. Military equipment manufacturers had requested detailed information about her rifle's performance during the engagement, seeking to understand how standard-issue equipment had achieved such extraordinary results. The data would influence future procurement decisions and weapon system development programs, potentially improving the capabilities of snipers throughout the armed forces for decades to come. Morrison visited Maria privately after the ceremony, bringing a bottle of bourbon that his team had signed in gratitude for her actions. Their conversation revealed the deeper bonds that formed between warriors who had faced death together, even though they had been separated by hundreds of meters during the actual fighting. He described the moment when he realized that accurate sniper fire was systematically eliminating the threats that would have overrun his position, understanding that an angel of death was watching over them from the distant ridge. The psychological evaluation required after intense combat revealed that Maria had processed the traumatic aspects of the engagement in healthy ways, drawing strength from the knowledge that her actions had saved lives rather than simply taken them. Military psychologists noted that her ability to compartmentalize the technical aspects of long-range shooting while maintaining awareness of the human cost demonstrated exceptional mental resilience, and professional maturity. Training programs throughout the military began incorporating lessons learned from Maria's engagement, particularly focusing on the integration of long-range sniper support with small unit operations. Her techniques for target prioritization under pressure became standard curriculum at sniper schools, where instructors used her decision-making process as a model for students facing similar tactical challenges. The captured weapons and equipment from the enemy force revealed the sophisticated nature of the threat that the SEALs had faced. Intelligence analysts determined that the ambush had been planned for weeks, with enemy commanders positioning their best fighters and most effective weapon systems to ensure the destruction of any American unit that attempted to assault the compound. The enemy had possessed overwhelming advantages in numbers, position, and firepower, making the mission's success even more remarkable. Media attention surrounding the mission remained limited due to operational security requirements, but within military circles, Maria's actions became legendary. Her photograph joined the ranks of famous American snipers, whose exceptional marksmanship had changed the outcome of important battles throughout history. Military historians would later rank her engagement among the most significant sniper actions of the entire Afghanistan conflict. The rescued CIA operative, after his recovery, sought Maria out to personally thank her for the actions that had saved his life. His intelligence work had been compromised by enemy infiltration of local networks, leading to his capture and the ambush that had nearly destroyed the rescue mission. He credited her with not only saving his life, but preserving months of intelligence gathering that had already led to successful operations against terrorist networks throughout the region. 6 months after the battle, Maria received orders for a new assignment training sniper instructors at a prestigious military school. Her combat experience and demonstrated expertise would be passed on to a new generation of marksmen, who might one day find themselves in similar situations, with American lives depending on their ability to make impossible shots under extreme pressure. The cycle of military excellence would continue, built upon the foundation of courage and skill demonstrated on a remote ridge in Afghanistan, where one woman with one rifle had changed the course of history. 2 years later, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stood before a classroom of aspiring snipers at the Army's premier marksmanship training facility. The young soldiers before her represented the future of American long-range precision shooting, and she carried the responsibility of preparing them for the life-and-death decisions that would define their careers. The lessons learned on Hidden Woman Ridge had become the foundation of her teaching, providing real-world examples that no textbook could adequately capture. Her students listened with rapt attention as she described the tactical challenges of providing overwatch for ground units operating in hostile territory. They studied the ballistic calculations required for extreme-range shooting, practiced the mental disciplines necessary for maintaining accuracy under stress, and learned the weight of responsibility that came with holding other soldiers' lives in their hands. Many would never face combat, but those who did would carry forward the lessons learned from that desperate battle in Afghanistan. Morrison, now promoted to commander and leading a SEAL training program, occasionally visited Maria's classroom to provide the ground unit perspective on sniper support operations. Together, they created training scenarios that replicated the challenges faced during their mission, ensuring that future generations of warriors would be better prepared for similar situations. Their partnership had evolved from a life-and-death battlefield relationship into a professional collaboration focused on saving lives through better training. The tactical innovations developed during Maria's engagement had been incorporated into military doctrine worldwide. Her techniques for rapid target acquisition and engagement priority under pressure were now taught in sniper schools across NATO countries. Military leaders recognized that modern asymmetric warfare required snipers who could operate independently for extended periods while providing critical support to conventional forces operating in dangerous environments. The psychological aspects of her experience had contributed to improved mental health support programs for military snipers. Researchers understood that the unique stresses faced by long-range marksmen required specialized counseling approaches that addressed the moral and emotional challenges of taking life from great distances. Maria's candid discussions of her own psychological processing had helped break down barriers that prevented many snipers from seeking necessary support services. Equipment improvements inspired by her mission had begun appearing in military inventories around the world. Rifle systems designed for greater accuracy at extended ranges, improved ammunition with better ballistic performance, and advanced optic systems that enhanced target acquisition capabilities were all influenced by analysis of her extraordinary shooting performance. The technological advances would provide future snipers with tools that matched the capabilities she had achieved through skill and determination alone. The micro-intelligence networks disrupted by the successful rescue mission had never fully recovered from the damage inflicted during the months following the operation. Counter-terrorism analysts credited the information gathered during the mission with preventing dozens of attacks against military and civilian targets throughout the region. The ripple effects of that single engagement continued to protect lives years after the last shot was fired from Hidden Woman Ridge. Maria's Bronze Star Medal had been joined by additional decorations recognizing her contributions to military training and doctrine development. But she remained most proud of the letters she received from former students who had successfully completed their own combat deployments. Several had credited her training with enabling them to provide effective support for ground units in situations similar to what she had faced in Afghanistan, creating a legacy of professional excellence that extended far beyond her personal achievements. The compound where the battle had taken place was eventually abandoned by enemy forces and transformed into an outpost for Afghan government security forces. Local residents reported that the area had become significantly safer following the disruption of the terrorist networks that had previously controlled the region. Children who had once lived in fear of violence were able to attend school regularly, and economic activity had resumed in areas that had been too dangerous for normal commerce. Documentary producers and military historians had approached Maria about telling her story to wider audiences, but she consistently declined requests that would sensationalize the combat experience or compromise operational security. She preferred to focus on the educational aspects of her experience, ensuring that the lessons learned would benefit future warriors rather than entertaining civilian audiences who could never fully understand the realities of modern warfare. Rodriguez, fully recovered from his wounds, had transitioned to a career in military intelligence, where his combat experience and technical expertise proved invaluable in analyzing enemy tactics and capabilities. He maintained contact with Maria and the other team members, understanding that their shared experience had created bonds that would last a lifetime. Annual reunions brought the survivors together to remember their fallen comrades and celebrate the successful mission that had defined their military careers. Chen had completed medical training and served as a flight surgeon, supporting special operations units around the world. His experience treating critical injuries under fire had taught him lessons about emergency medicine that no civilian hospital could provide. He often told colleagues that Maria's shooting had given him the time necessary to stabilize patients who would have died without her protective fire from the distant ridge. The military leadership principles demonstrated during the crisis had become case studies taught at command and staff colleges throughout the armed forces. Morrison's decision to hold the compound despite overwhelming odds, combined with Maria's willingness to maintain her position despite personal danger, exemplified the type of courage and determination that defined American military excellence. Future officers studied their actions as models of effective leadership under extreme pressure. As Maria concluded another day of instruction, she looked out at the training ranges where her students practiced the skills that might one day save American lives in distant battlefields. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows that reminded her of that morning on Hidden Woman Ridge, when she had prepared to fire the shots that would define her career. The memory was no longer painful, but instead had become a source of strength and purpose that guided her efforts to prepare the next generation of American warriors. The legacy of Hidden Woman Ridge lived on in every accurate shot fired by her students, every successful mission supported by snipers she had trained, and every life saved by warriors who carried forward the lessons learned during those desperate hours in Afghanistan. A single rifle in the hands of a determined woman had changed not only the outcome of one battle, but had influenced military training and tactics that would protect American forces for generations to come.